Today's program is part of the Pulse Moments That Matter, a series of frank conversations on culturally relevant topics with those in the entertainment industry. The Pulse is a joint initiative of Moment and Neranenah, which is an event series with roots in Jewish culture and musical traditions based in Atlanta. Jonah Platt has acted in films, performed on Broadway, and written for a number of TV comedies. He is currently producing his first feature film, The Mensch, and he will co-star alongside Ginnifer Goodwin. Jonah is also a singer, musician, and an award-winning vocal arranger. He is co-writing the musical adaptation of Lois Lowry's best-selling novel, The Giver. In addition, Jonah is a trusted voice in the modern conversation on Jewish identity, culture, and current events, and he hosts the new hit podcast, Being Jewish with Jonah Platt. The podcast explores the diverse spectrum of Jewish identity through conversations with a wide array of notable guests. Jonah's words on the Jewish experience have appeared in Variety, The New York Post, LA Magazine, Jewish Journal, and most recently, The Times of Israel. Joining Jonah today is Joe Alterman, the executive director of Neranenah. Joe is also a jazz musician and has performed at many world-renowned venues, including the Kennedy Center, Lincoln Center, Birdland, and Blue Note, alongside Ramsey Lewis, Houston Person, Les McCann, Dick Gregory, and his own jazz trio, among others. Please welcome Jonah Platt and Joe Alterman.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Hey, Jonah, thank you for joining us
Hey,
today.
Joe, great to be here. And yes, thank you, Suzanne.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot here, and I'm excited to talk to you about it. And I know, you have you're sort of a Renaissance man. Some people say to call that a portfolio career these days. I don't know,
Hmm,
but
I haven't heard that one.
I heard it recently. It's
I
not
like it.
bad, but yeah. But between acting, music, and advocacy, you have many talents and passions and interests, and they all kind of play into each other in some ways. But I was just curious if you were always interested in these three things, or what came into your life first, or what resonated it with you first.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really doing advocacy in any way until spring of 2021. So
Hmm.
the easy answer to that is entertainment, the performing arts. Really,
Hmm.
performing arts was my earliest memories. There's videos of me at 2 years old singing My Fair Lady. That's what I was raised on. My family's passion for musical theater above all things, but
Hmm.
also just entertainment in general, movies, TV, and that's always what I did. That was always my passion. I was always putting on shows with my siblings and cousins, and any school project that I could turn into a show instead of something else, I would always make it a show. That was my favorite after school activity, was doing musical theater and playing in
Mm.
bands and singing in choir, doing improv, all that stuff. And the Jewish advocacy came much, much later and much more recently.
Yeah. Well, did you ever, with your art? I mean, I know you don't call the performance advocacy. Did you see your performing as a musician or an actor as any sort of advocacy, or more as a distraction from things that were happening in the world? I'm just,
Honestly, no. I mean,
yeah.
um, the only time where that was maybe an intersection was I've had the opportunity to play Jewish characters a couple of times,
Hmm.
especially more recently in my career. Chief among them was I was one of the lead roles in a developmental musical that did a run in San Francisco and one in New Jersey called A Walk on the Moon, based on a great film from 1999 of the same name. And that character was a Jewish dad with young kids, Jewish husband, and all the characters except for one are Jews. And so I definitely felt a sense of pride in getting to bring authenticity to that role and get to be doing the thing I love to do, and being Jewish while doing it was special. And then I also
Hmm.
starred in a Hanukkah movie for Hulu called Menorah in the Middle, which again I just was like very psyched to be a part of a Hanukkah movie. There's not too many of them, and getting to be Jewish on screen, where the only thing inherently sort of outwardly facing Jewish is the fact that we're talking about Hanukkah and we talk about going to Jewish summer camp. It's like just very normal, like just as I am,
Hmm.
like a person who happens to be Jewish. And I love
Hmm.
seeing that kind of thing represented on screen. And I was proud to be part of that.
Totally. Well, I guess, you know, that raises the question, I think, is, I'm so fascinated by what is Jewish art. And like, is anything you do, would you consider everything you do Jewish because you're Jewish, or would you say that there are certain things you do that are Jewish and certain things that aren't Jewish?
Yeah, I think the way I would answer that is, look, and this is obviously for anybody. Everything I do
Hmm.
is through the prism of Jonah. And
Hmm.
Jonah is Jewish, so that might filter in to whatever I'm doing just because that's part of the makeup of who I am. But many,
Hmm.
many things are part of the makeup of who I am, not just that piece. So I don't think it would be right to say specifically it's Jewish. If I'm up there, singing Christmas carols at a holiday concert, I don't think I'm doing it as a Jew. Like, it's not a Jewish piece of art. Although I
Hmm.
try to sing Hebrew songs at the Christmas shows because like I want to bring some balance there. But
Hmm.
there are, I think, specific ways to be Jewish in your art. I mean, far more than I've done there, and I can think of it in a number of mediums. I mean, the first thing that pops into my mind, it's much more literal, but there's an artist named Alex Woes who is an artist, and all of the art he does it's Jewish. There's Hebrew, and the messaging is Jewish. It's all wrapped up in it, and like to me, that's okay. That's Jewish art, as opposed to
Hmm.
I am a Jew doing some sort of art, therefore that art is Jewish.
Hmm. Like I noticed on your website, you have your musician section, and you have a Jewish music section. I didn't know if that was designed more for getting gigs, or if that was
Yeah, I
that's
mean that.
Jewish music to you. Yeah.
Yeah, that was good eye, by the way. That's because I don't know who's coming and what they're looking for, so I wanted to put all the Jewish music in its own kind of playlist. So if you're
Hmm.
interested in, yes, like hiring me to do something Jewish, you can see where all that is. But also maybe
Hmm.
the most popular video I have is when my brothers and I sang Ahavat Olam
Hmm.
during COVID. So a lot of people have found me through that. And so if you're like, oh,
Hmm.
what's the other Jewish music this guy's got? Like now you can find it more easily than, parsing through Broadway stuff and rock stuff and like
Mm.
which one of these is going to be the Hebrew one. I'm lost. So just, trying to make it
Hmm.
easier, more user friendly.
Well, we appreciate that. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
But yes, I mean, there are times like the Jewish music all came from, when I was being, so like I did a solo concert. Basically, anytime I do a concert, that's a solo concert, I do something in Hebrew.
Hmm.
So there's definitely that falls under, I think, the category of when it's me, that's you're coming to see Jonah Platt in concert.
Hmm.
There is an element of Jewish art to that because of who I am, and then I'm gonna be incorporating that somehow.
I see. Yeah. Well, like,
Yeah,
how did I know Jewish summer camp was a big part of your,
huge.
how did, yeah, I mean, how did that impact your art and who you are,
I would say it didn't impact my art really in
Hmm.
any way, except how it paid dividends for that Hanukkah movie because I knew exactly who that character was. But on a personal level, like my groomsmen in my wedding were my brothers, my
Mm.
brother-in-laws, my cousins, and my camp friends.
Mm.
And I just got back from a weekend away with my four best camp friends and our wives for one of them's 40th birthday. Like those are
Nice.
my boys.
Hmm.
And so I met my like lifelong best friends at summer camp.
Hmm.
Some people get them in high school, some people get them in college, whatever. Mine are my camp guys.
Hmm.
And I don't know what to attribute that to really. I mean, we kind of got lucky that that's where we found each other. But that is
Hmm.
what was so formative about that place for me. It was actually, there's three things. It was like meeting my best friends, all my
Hmm.
cousins and siblings, we all went to the same camp. So we got to
Mm.
really grow up together, spending time together, having shared experience together, understanding
Mm.
of each other's lives together, just really special. Like so many of us, 15 cousins at a time at this camp.
Wow.
And then the third thing is, even if you don't necessarily appreciate it at the time while you're a kid and doing it, you are just so immersed in Jewishness. It's like
Hmm.
impossible for that not to shape your sense of Jewish identity in a meaningful way. Even if you're
Mm.
like me, who's like ditching prayers because you find it so boring and don't want to be there. Like, I still love doing the Israeli dance. I still love doing the singing. I still loved, you know, so many different elements. There's so many different entry points.
Hmm.
And so I would say that was hugely formative in my Jewish identity. Was we take it for granted here in America that, like, going to summer camp and being around only Jews all day
Hmm.
who are all doing Jewish stuff. Like that's Israel all the time for people who live there. And for us, it's like we
Hmm.
got 1 month a year where we could really be steeped in it. And I think it's very special.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, in my life, I went to Jewish summer camp. My boys are my camp
Oh,
people,
I
and
love it.
you know, yeah. I
Were you
mean,
like
for
Rosh
me,
Shirah or something? Did you do music there?
well, no, I mean, I've been strummed some chords and stuff, but
Okay,
there was
okay.
no pianos around. But
No piano.
not at this camp. Yeah,
Brutal.
I know. But we got by. And it was I loved camp. And I don't always, I think about what's Jewish about the music that I love, and it's I feel like when I first realized that music, how powerful it could be, is when the guitars would start at Shabbat on Shabbat at camp, and they weren't playing
Mm,
anything Jewish. It was just all of a sudden everything felt elevated, and
yeah.
I just discovered in that moment how powerful it is. But it's interesting because I talked to a lot of friends who loves Jewish summer camp, and really that's where they have their Jewish pride. And you talk about, I don't know what kind of music they played at your camp, but interestingly, a lot of my friends, like, now they hear a song like Green Day, Time of Your Life, and they feel Jewish. There's nothing Jewish about this song, but it takes them back to that
Sure.
time.
Time and a
Does that
place. Hmm.
totally? Well, I'm just curious, what kind of music was that music happening at your camp, or was it
Yeah, I
mostly
mean, of course,
Hebrew?
you're
Yeah.
preteens and middle schoolers and whatever. Like you're listening to music, but like when I think
Hmm.
about camp, I think about the Hebrew songs. Like once
Hmm.
or twice a week, we would have Shirah. I mean, you sing Hebrew songs, and then the dining hall,
Mm.
you're singing Hebrew songs all the time.
Hmm.
Um, so lots of Hebrew, and then every day before lunch and dinner, there's Israeli dancing on the patio, like as you're waiting to go into the meals. So all
Hmm.
of those songs are like deeply ingrained in my mind, and
Mm.
would take me right back there whenever I hear them.
Mm.
There's one. It was Israel's Eurovision song from like the '70s called Zodiac.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a banger. And they, that most people would know it for that, but I think immediately of like dancing to it on the patio at my camp when I hear that song.
Hmm. Oh, totally. Yeah, that's great. Well, uh, what, I'm thinking about music, and I'm thinking, I ask a lot of people what is Jewish music, and I had an interesting conversation with Jason Robert Brown, and he said, I've spoken to many Jews who love music, and maybe don't start out, they truthfully, they early in their life they'll find their spirituality through the music, and then later in life will come back and realize, like, I talked to a guy who did his bar mitzvah, and he went home. He didn't really know what he had done that day because he didn't really understand what he was saying. But then
Sure.
he put on a record, and then he felt like that was his bar mitzvah that day. But
Mm,
then years later, he went to his son's bar mitzvah, and all of a sudden he heard a melody that he hadn't heard since, his bar mitzvah. And all of a sudden, he got it, that it was really the same thing, because he felt like at his son's bar mitzvah, he was standing next to his dad and his grandpa, who have passed years and years before. And so
hmm
there's this, the good stuff. It kind of makes you feel connected to the past. I mentioned this to Jason, and Jason said that he had it was when Parade was still on Broadway, and he said that the theater that they showed, that they were playing Parade, was where his dad took him to his first um Broadway show. And so he says whenever the show is happening, he will often look up to those seats where he sat with his dad. And it's kind of a similarly kind of like emotional thing. Interestingly, I talked to David Broza and shared that with him, and he said that he doesn't care if it's the melody. He says as long as he's saying the same words that his grandpa and his dad felt,
mm.
he feels connected to the past in the same way. So I guess I don't know if there's anything you resonate with there, but also, like, do you feel like your Jewish journeys and your artistic journeys paralleled each other? Like, did you always get spirituality from the Jewish part, or I know it's a bit of a packed question, but take that wherever you want.
Yeah. Ask that a different way, that last part.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. So I guess have you always, in terms of your spirituality, has your spirituality, I guess, has your Judaism and your art always played into your spirituality, or have there been times when you might have, your spiritual journey might not have paralleled your Jewish journey? Does that?
Yeah. I, I wouldn't necessarily call myself a very spiritual person. I'm a
Mhm.
very sort of earthbound, logic-based kind of guy, which is makes spirituality difficult. Um, the moments in life where I have sort of maybe felt some sort of spirituality and transcendence, I think music definitely has played a part in those moments. Like of all the mediums that like can move a person, like musical theater has moved me the most.
Mm-hmm.
There have been that's where I really feel it. It's that power of music to sort of supersede other things to reach you in a different, deeper way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I definitely have experienced like many of those moments in a synagogue or in a circle for Havdalah or whatever it is, where the music makes me definitely feel more connected and a part of that chain,
Mm-hmm.
and part of something bigger than myself. It's just it's I don't know if this is a word. It's transportive.
Yeah.
You know, it lifts you out of yourself. It elevates an experience, and um, it's a beautiful thing. It's there's it, I'm just realized like the being in that zone. I was in an a cappella group in college called Off the Beat
Mm.
that I loved, and like our formation that we would stand in, we would call the arc, and we would be it's like a really tight like U-shaped huddle. Like most groups are kind of
Mm.
spread out, and we were like on top of each other. And just the feeling of like singing these songs together in that tight physical space with that music, that's very sort of holy to me.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Just curious, like in that a cappella group, like what did it all like when you listen to you and your brothers, like it seems like you got the brotherly thing, you know? I mean, was it easier to get that together than being in an a cappella group or did
Oh yeah. I mean, well,
yeah, I
first
mean,
of all, like my a cappella group was like, complicated 8-part
mm,
rock songs,
oh,
whatever,
mhm,
really, really high level of difficulty. With my brothers, we're all singing a solo line together essentially. It's not like we're doing like
mhm,
weird parts or whatever. But we're we're
mhm,
we're such good musicians, the three of us,
mhm,
in terms of like being able to pick things up in our ear, and
mm,
our musicality is just very strong. And
mm,
we naturally like we all sang in the same choirs at different times in high school. Like we all know the concepts. We know about blend. We know about dynamics. We're
mm.
we're kind of we're pros.
Right,
So
right, right.
it was pretty
Mhm.
easy to pick up and do together, and it was a lot of fun.
Totally. Well, you mentioned My Fair Lady when you were like three. I'm just curious, like to go back just a little bit, like what was your first like aha moments or your influences or your heroes? Like, you know,
Are you talking artistically?
I got yeah, yeah, artistically, like yeah, maybe musically and acting. I mean, or whatever comes to
So I'll
mind,
say
really.
I'll say I'll
Yeah.
answer that in a couple ways. I would say out of the musical theater world, that and this is still true today, is my biggest influence musically is the Beatles.
Mm,
Um, Talk about like transcendent. Like I
hmm
when I was introduced to them, I was 9 years old. I like remember when I
mm,
like really did my deep dive, and
mm,
I was like, this is incredible. I bought every single album, and I went so deep. Like
mm,
renting all their movies and watching them every week, and just burning out those CDs, just like listening to them in repeat rotation all day over and over and over. And
mm,
I'm still like, I've never gotten tired of it. I still find their music amazing. I was talking with a happens to be Jewish, a Jewish composer friend of mine, a guy named Gabe Mann, who's in a band called The
mm,
Rescues, and who I've
hmm
collaborated with on a bunch of stuff. And he arranged Ahavat Olam. This is what we were
mm,
talking about. And he was like, what you're aiming for as a composer, and what Ahavat Olam was, is that like it like already existed in the universe, and you just like had to pull it out, and there it was.
hmm
And
hmm
I feel like 75% of the Beatles songs are like that, where it's like, oh,
hmm
this song already existed exactly like this. It's natural. It like came from the
hmm
universe. And just that level of the way those songs moved me and how musical they were, that that definitely that's I started playing guitar because of that, and that's
mm,
been a big feature of my musicianship. So that's a huge influence. And I would say, in the theater world, just I always loved musical theater of all kinds. And I think like a big breakout moment for me was when I started doing it in this after school program called the Adderley School. And I started when I was 8, and my first class was going to be a musical review. And I remember, I think this must have been the first rehearsal. And we showed up and we start singing Corner of the Sky from Pippin, which I don't know if the other kids had ever heard of it or knew whatever, but I knew it backwards and forwards because we listened to it in my dad's car a million times. And we got to this one part in the song where it goes, eagles belong where they can fly. And I did this little riff from the show, fly, whatever. and my teacher turned to me like stone cold and was like, do that. And like that confidence and like being seen in that way, and that like that I feel like I never looked back from that. Like that like laid the foundation for me to be confident in what I was doing and in myself. And it really, I mean, it stayed with me for 30 years, that moment.
Wow, man. Well, in my world, I had some teachers who would say the process of learning jazz is imitate, assimilate, innovate. And
I think that's true for anything. I mean, I really think that's it. You
For
copy.
sure.
I like you say that sounds like writing to me. Like as a script writing, it's like you have to copy someone else's style while you're trying to just figure out how to do it, and then you're starting to incorporate their style into yours as you're discovering what that is. And then once you've mastered all of that, now you're a master and you can you have your own voice and you're doing your own thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can relate to that.
100%.
Yeah. I know we when we had a prep call, we were kind of talking about finding your voice and speaking about the, that process, I was just curious, like, and we're going to get into the podcast and stuff, but when you say you feel like you found your voice, like, do you feel like you have one voice that plays into all of the things you do? Or like, were you specifically talking about the podcast, for example? Like, do you feel like you have 3 separate voices that do all these things you like? Or I'm trying to figure out the right way to ask that question. But I think you know what I'm saying.
It's an interesting question. I would say it's less that like I found a voice that I didn't know I had, and more like realizing that like this is the voice I should be using, and that this is the one I need to be the loudest with, and also giving myself the permission to like go for it fully in this lane. Because like as I mentioned at the beginning of this, I started doing advocacy in 2021. So in terms of like, I'd say 85-90% of the tone and like the content that I'm talking about, I was talking about then. So I was there. I've refined it a little bit, but it's more that realizing this is sort of what I'm supposed to be doing with my life at this moment, and saying, okay, when you hear from me now, it's not going to be necessarily about some TV gig I'm doing, or it's not going to be as this character. It's going to be as Jonah, and I'm going to be talking about the things that really matter to me.
I see. So you kind of feel like the art has led you, everything you've done has led you to what you're doing now. Yeah.
That I feel like for sure. Producing a podcast is no joke. I mean, it's a lot of people, and this works for some, is like, okay, I'm going to buy a microphone, I'm going to stick a camera in front of my face in my bedroom, and I'm going to figure it out. That's never been my style. I mean, like I said to you again, it's like I made the school project. I was like, oh, I'm putting on a play. It's like I've been like producing my own shows for a long time. So when I was like, I'm going to make a podcast, it was like, oh, I'm going to make it kick-ass, professional, polished from the first second you start watching it. So, it allowed me to use, I use my writing, I use my performance in the way, I do these monologues at the beginning of each episode. And it's not like I'm acting, I'm not playing a part, but I am speaking in a compelling way where I'm not just sort of like reading a speech. I'm delivering a monologue. So I get to sort of do that. I get to use like my improv brain, which is like my favorite type of performance art. Being in conversation with someone, it's live. We're going back and forth. It is what it is. And so I get to use, I know the theme song is me singing this sort of a cappella style kind of theme song that my buddy Gabe wrote.
Uh,
So I got to incorporate that too.
mm,
So it's bringing all those elements of and the network and relationships that I've
mhm,
built in my career in entertainment that I never utilized for myself all these
mm,
years. Finally, it was like, all right, I'm doing this thing. I'm gonna call on my network of friends now, and like, will you be a guest? Can you connect me to somebody, et cetera, et
mm,
cetera. And
mhm,
that feels very validating. I feel good about it. That like, I waited and I never tried to take advantage of anybody or push anybody too hard in anything. And then the time came to like, okay, I'm gonna assert myself here and
mhm.
make the phone calls, and it's paying off in a big way.
That's great. Well, yeah, I love what you do,
Thank
man.
you.
Well, yeah. Well, oh my gosh, I just lost my train. But that's part of the live thing. But we're getting there. What was I? Um, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Well,
Fine.
yeah, yeah. Well, what inspired you? That was what I was going to ask you. In 2021, what inspired and did you always call it advocacy, or was it just also ever like
No.
just looking into stuff you liked or were interested in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when it
Hmm.
started was in spring of 2021, there was
Hmm.
violence between Israel and Gaza.
Hmm.
It was around this Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, if you remember that name. Like
Mm,
there were like tenants who were being kicked out, and there was like protests at Al-Aqsa Mosque. There was just all this, balagan happening, and
mm,
that was the first time I was seeing on social media a place where I felt I could be helpful. I saw that
mm,
people were confused. They couldn't make heads or tails of what was going on. Um, and felt like I did understand what was going on. And I just wanted to come in and help
mm,
clarify stuff for people in a nuanced way from a place of, good faith and some education.
mhm,
And that I instantly saw the positive feedback there of people being like, that was helpful. That
mm,
you are providing a service.
mhm,
And so I wasn't calling it advocacy. It's not something I was doing full time in any stretch. But that's where it sort
mhm,
of started. And it was like, okay, now I'm Jonah, the actor, who sometimes uses his social media to also talk about Jewish stuff when
mhm,
mostly when there's like a current event kind of a thing happening that needs some filtering.
mm,
And then it slowly started to build from there, just kind of organically. Another big turning point for me was in April of 2023. I was a fellow of an organization called the Tel Aviv Institute, started by a guy named Chen
mm,
Mazig, who's an amazing
mm,
online Jewish, educator.
mhm,
And it was a program. It was like 20 social media personalities, all Jewish from all over the
mhm,
world, all different professional fields.
mm,
Everybody's so different, but I was so inspired being in the room with this peer group of mine from all over the world doing all these different things. Some of them talked about being Jewish online, some of them didn't at all, but like it
mm,
didn't matter. I just felt like when I get back home, I'm going to do more. I want to be
mhm,
more, I want to
mm,
invest more in this. And so I
mhm,
did that. I've been speaking on, and then I started to like ask to be speak at things a little bit more. I'd done
mm,
like a couple of things here and there, but not consistent. And then October
mm,
7th happened, and it was just, gasoline on the fire of my involvement in the Jewish space.
mhm,
Immediately, I took to social media on October 8th to start trying to
mm,
help people understand stuff. I did like two-hour live Q&As where I was just saying, send me your
mm.
questions. I'm going to answer everything and try to help clear things up. And people are,
Wow.
sharing it all over. This is really long, but it explains so much. Everybody should listen.
Mm,
Um, and I just felt it was not like an intentional decision making thing. Like I'm going to go do this now. It was like
mhm,
I wanted to be. I was like, I
mhm,
just want to be spending my energy on this. I couldn't pull myself away.
mhm,
What else mattered? I was like, I'm gonna go
mhm,
like do an audition for The Rookie right now. It's like, no, that's like this is insane what's happening. And I want to be connected
mhm,
to my community. I want to be helping people.
mm,
I want to be consuming the news. Like what the hell's going
mhm,
on? So I got really invested there. And then like
mhm,
January, February of last year, it was like, okay, the immediacy of that moment it's still, I mean, it's still going on today, but like the immediacy had cooled somewhat. Like I was no longer meeting a hostage family in Los Angeles every week. You know, they have been coming through and coming through. And I was at one like every week. I was leading panels, all this stuff.
Wow.
It started to quiet down January, February a little bit. And I started to think like, okay, what do I want to do with this now? I don't just, you know, I like what this is. I want to be spending my time giving this service. It happened to coincide with, you know, Hollywood totally contracting and production slowing, and after the writer strike and actor strike, like jobs disappearing. So it's not like I was super busy. So which is sort of a gift. And I thought, you know, a podcast I think could be a good way to take this to the next level, to expand on what I'm already doing, and to also get back to what I had been doing with my Jewish advocacy from like in 2023, which was trying to be celebratory and empowering about Jewish stuff, not just reactive to whatever was going on. So like right when I got back from that Tel Aviv trip, I partnered with them to do a Father's Day video about being a Jewish father and like what that means. Like that kind of stuff where like normalizing someone in entertainment not being afraid to like talk about Jewish stuff and how being Jewish is important in my life and how that affects my time and my family. And so the podcast, like one of the main things I want to do is just normalize Jews talking about Jewish stuff with each other or with non-Jewish allies, and that's not like political or controversial or scary. It's like totally normal, and we should all feel comfortable doing it. So that was part of it. I wanted to expand on the educational stuff and like, you know, instead of spending all day coming up with like off the cuff videos for Instagram, I'm going to, you know, script really well thought out monologues and do that once a week and be consistent with it. And then also just really, again, getting to the idea of empowering others by leading by example. Like if I can be a loud and proud Jew so much that I have a show called Being Jewish and I'm, you know, putting it on the internet, like you can say something at your workplace when somebody says something that they shouldn't say, or, you know, you can bring latkes to the staff room on Hanukkah or put your Star of David necklace on. And by far the most satisfying feedback I've gotten from the show are the stories of people who say, because of your podcast, I spoke out at this thing. I got my school received this calendar and it had Christmas on it, not Hanukkah. And I reached back out and they added Hanukkah because, you know, your show inspired me to like stand up. Stuff like that. It's like, it makes me feel amazing. It's like, oh, it's working. Like what I hoped this show would do, it's doing. And that's why I love doing it.
That's amazing. Well, you know, I know we've talked a lot about music and stuff and the arts, but you just said that you were able to on October 8th explain. Well, so you must have you must have had a long interest in the news, this kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say I was always like, I've always been a pretty well-informed person just generally. Like I like to know what's going on in the world to a certain degree. I like to understand how things work. I'm not just like a live under a rock kind of person. There's nothing wrong with that. They're probably a lot happier than I am. But I'm a happy guy. I would say after like it was around probably 2020, 2021 where I started to really become more strongly educated and take a real interest in this and wanting to be just sort of bulletproof in my understanding of everything and starting to really consume a lot of educational stuff, following a lot of, you know, Jewish accounts and Jewish educational accounts and Jewish influencers and Israeli stuff, and really sort of brick by brick building up my foundation. It's not like I didn't do it overnight with 2 YouTube videos, you know. It's like many years of books and audiobooks and movies and conversations and programs and panels and leadership trainings. And you know, I've done leadership training programs. I've done 2 at Jewish Federation. I've done 1 at ADL. I've done 1 at Israel Policy Forum. You know, I put the time in. I'm actually right now I'm studying to get my master's in anti-Semitism studies. Which is new. This is the first cohort they've ever had it for, which I'm psyched about. So yeah, you know, I just wanted to really know it. I felt like it was so important, and if I was going to be able to talk about it intelligently, I didn't know what I was talking about. So I've just been continue, and I never stop. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm reading something new every week.
Hmm. I mean, it sounds like, I mean, you're working hard, obviously, but you obviously love this too. Like, I mean,
It's like it feels so right. It's felt
hmm.
this has felt more right to me than anything I've done in a long time. There've been like a
Wow.
couple moments in my career where it was an alignment of like self and job and time and
Hmm.
place, but
Hmm.
those are the lucky few, and they're very
Hmm.
fleeting because when the gig's up,
Hmm.
the gig's up.
Right, right.
This is, this will go for as long as I really want it to go, and
Hmm.
is impacting people in a way I could never do, being in a TV show or whatever, in a
Hmm.
really, real world meaningful way. And that's priceless to me.
Totally. Well, you mentioned being loud and proud about being Jewish, and I love your podcast, but I was amazed that when I went to your website, the first thing that came up is this pop-up to sign up for your podcast. So I was just curious, I mean, that means that people who, you have an audition for anyone who goes to your website, the first thing they're going to see is that. And I've met so many Jewish artists, and I will admit that I've been one of them who's like, I'm a piano player or whatever, but I don't necessarily want everyone to see me as the Jewish piano player. I want to be a piano. And so I was just curious, like, um, what you've maybe learned about yourself from putting that up, and maybe what you've learned about have other people who are not, maybe not into your, maybe not familiar with your podcast. Has that changed any of your relationships with non-Jewish people, or has, I'm just curious what the feedback to doing
Yeah.
that has
I,
done.
so I totally understand someone who's like, I'm a piano player. I don't want to be known as like that Jewish piano player. Like,
Hmm.
that makes total sense to me if that's what you're about. Like, not everybody has to, like, there are different ways to be loud and proud Jewish than make it your
Right,
career.
right, right.
It's
Hmm.
it's in whatever way and world that makes sense for you. If you're
Hmm.
if you someone I want to be a loud and proud Jew, but I don't want to be known as the Jewish piano player. That's like,
Hmm.
it means maybe I'm wearing my Star of David necklace while I'm playing music that has
Hmm.
absolutely nothing to do with religion or spirituality at all. But that's it, because I like to wear this
Hmm.
necklace. Or it's, you
Hmm.
know, I don't wear the necklace, but on Friday I'm having Shabbat dinner, and like no one has to know
Hmm.
about that except for me and the people I'm doing it with. And maybe if I post a picture online because I like sharing photos of my life online, I'm not going to
Hmm.
not show the Shabbat because I'm afraid people think I'm Jewish. I'm going to show it
Right,
because that's
right.
who I am, and that's what I like to do.
Hmm.
That
Yeah.
to me is loud and proud and Jewish. It's just like, it's not altering your behavior for someone else's comfort level.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
there was another part to your question, but now I'm
Well, it
forgetting
was
what it
like,
was.
yeah, I mean, basically, the
Oh
more
yeah,
you've
for
embraced
me,
your Judy, yeah,
yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I've gotten, honestly, from actual humans and not just like pro pally trolls, like
Hmm.
only positive feedback. I have a lot of
That's
non-Jews in my
great.
audience, people
Hmm.
who are like really grateful to be learning this stuff, like
Hmm.
people, like good people who care and like want to understand more, and
Hmm.
are very sadly, and this is the failings of our society, like they're not getting that voice and education from mainstream
Hmm.
media. They're only getting it if they're following specific Jewish content creators or voices.
Hmm.
It's just not super mainstream. So look, I always say this. It's like, I don't know if somebody came across that and was like, "Oh, I'm not going to ask this guy to be in my movie." Like, I would never know if that happened or
Hmm.
not. But I've certainly
Right,
never
right.
had like a direct, inference that has been negative in any way. And if anything, and this is
Mm.
true to a T to essentially every guest I've had on my show, like I've
Mm.
gotten so much more recognition, opportunity, support,
Mm.
um, all of it since I've been doing this stuff and being my like
Mm.
full authentic Jewish self. It also feels so much better to just
I
be
bet.
who you
Yeah.
are, like, all the time.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's
yeah.
been my opportunities. Maybe I whether I've lost anything or not, new doors and avenues have opened, new people and
Hmm.
relationships have formed, that never would have happened before. I mean, you and I wouldn't be sitting here talking right now if I was just
For
auditioning for
sure.
TV shows.
For sure.
You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Hmm. For sure. Yeah. And yeah, I guess the more you yeah, you embrace your yeah. The more you embrace who you are, the less you care about the other people, what the other people
That's
think, and stuff
exactly
like
it,
that.
Joe. It's like
Yeah.
we have to each live our own lives the way we want to, and like as
Hmm.
who we are. No one else. It's like the only people who feel shitty when we try to make other people feel comfortable is us, and like we're
Right.
no one has to live your life but you, so you should live it in the way that is the truest and most authentic to you. And if someone else
Hmm.
has a problem with that, like that's their problem, and that's not someone you
Totally.
need around you anyway.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I realized I love doing shows that have a Jewish theme.
Yeah,
And I realized it's just for a long time I was worried that, I'd reach out to a venue and they'd say, "Oh, that's the Jewish piano." It's not that I like being the Jewish piano player. And now that I don't care I can't control what someone in a booking office does or what they think, it doesn't matter because it wasn't meant to be. I'm happy doing the things I like to do. And it's, obviously
yeah. There you
you
go.
too. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
not
Well, I
like
mean,
it's. I would imagine it's not like the door has been shut to you from doing non-Jewish material,
oh, totally. No,
right?
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
good.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's great. Yeah, so it's all. I feel like all of this is, it's all. You say it's jazz or it's music. It's really all just a journey of discovering who you are through all of this stuff, and you're gonna have
being
hardship.
true to yourself, and like
Mm,
really. I did a monologue on my podcast about this. How the
mm,
feeling of being in alignment with like self and purpose and all that. There's a Japanese term like ikigai, I think it is.
mm,
It's like when you are, it's this Venn diagram of like doing what you like to
mm,
do that you can make money at, that is
mm.
like helpful to others or something. There's some circle. I forget what all the parts are, but
Yeah.
it's a beautiful concept. And
Hmm.
my friend was like, I feel like you've hit ikigai. And I was like, what is that? And so I had to
Mm.
look it up. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I have. It's like
That's
finally,
awesome.
and it feels amazing for me.
Mm,
And on top of the other stuff, it took me getting diagnosed with ADHD to help me get into that
mm,
alignment. Speaking
mm.
because like to really be your true self, you have to know your true self. And I learned so much about myself. Like so many things clicked into place once I understood that I had ADHD.
Ah.
But that like it all happened at the same time. That starting the pod, understanding I had ADHD, and I've like never looked back and have never felt so in myself.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful, beautiful journey, this whole thing,
Yeah, man, it really is.
Yeah. I know we're running out of time. We got some audience Q&A, so I
Oh,
was hoping,
terrific.
I didn't know if there was anything I missed relating to the podcast that you'd like to share, or if, I was curious also about the Mensch, and if you could share a little bit about that. I mean, it sounds awesome.
Yeah, I've been ugh. So I'm producing this movie. I hate producing. I got to be honest with you.
Mm,
I don't like it at all. The only reason
mm,
I'm producing this movie is, well, there's two reasons. It's funny, and we've touched on both of them. One is the
mm.
writer director. I was his counselor at Jewish sleepaway camp,
What?
and even from that age, I don't know. He probably would have been like 13, 14. I would have been like 17 or something.
Mm,
We like bonded over our love of movies. I have a
mm,
deep knowledge of movies and filmmaking, whatever, and he's like a cinephile to the max. And even
mm.
at that age, was like, I'm going to be a director. Went to NYU Film,
Ah,
has never wanted to
mm.
do anything, has never done anything else since. And so this, I've been like a mentor to him from that time. And this was the
Cool.
first time he brought me a project that he had written where I was like this is something I'm really excited about on
Mm,
another level, because it was doing what I had been sort of advocating for before. I've spoken a lot about Jews in entertainment and Jewish representation. I wrote something for
mm,
Variety about it. I've given speeches about it. And something I'm always looking for is like contemporary Jewish stories where
mm,
Jews are playing Jews. It's written by Jews. It's about contemporary people being people, and those people happen to be Jewish. So
mm,
it's not about like the Jews don't die. It's not about the Holocaust. The Jews are not saved by a non-Jew at the last minute.
mm,
It's just a story about characters who are Jewish. It's like
mm,
as my friend Jalen Livingston, who I interviewed on the pod, would say, it's living in a
mm,
Jewish world where you're not,
mm,
defined by your condition. You're just the people that you are.
mm,
And this script was that. Plus, it was, just on its own, like really entertaining and genre bending and unique tone. And I loved it. So he was like,
Mm.
I think you should produce this. And I was like, okay, you're right. Even though I hate producing and like every day I'm in it, I'm like, man, I hate this. But I also I love this project, but also being a producer is just like herding cats like nonstop.
Mm.
Which is just not what I want to be doing. But so like I don't think I'm going to produce any movies after this one, but I'm going to see
Mm.
this one through. It's a really unique story. I'll give you the quick spiel. It's kind of
Yeah.
complicated, so I can't give you the one sentence log line. But basically, it's about a rabbi. At times, this role has been a male. Right now, it's female. We're finding that more interesting. So, female
Mm.
rabbi, junior rabbi in Arizona, which is where the writer director's from, and is based on some of his experience there. Junior rabbi at a sad, like empty, failing synagogue. She's engaged, but hasn't pulled the trigger. Is a former addict, has a lot of demons. Not connecting with the
Mm.
congregation how she thought she would. Things just not looking like she thought they were going to look in her life. And then one
Mm.
night she's alone in the synagogue, and basically a white nationalist dude comes in and pistol whips her and desecrates the synagogue. So they shut the synagogue down, and this is all at the very beginning. And
Mm.
they're going to have a big reopening ceremony like 2 weeks later and try to really bring the community around it, bring some press to it, try to revive this
Mm.
synagogue. And to aid in that, one of the synagogue's congregants, this sort of loner, eccentric woman who's being played by Ginnifer Goodwin, who's a fantastic actress,
Mm.
she donates her family's Holocaust era Torah that had been smuggled out of Nazi Germany, this priceless Torah, to sort of give it some zhuzh to this event. And the rabbi's tasked with just going and picking it up from the sofer and bringing it to the synagogue the night before the event. A bunch
Mm.
of crap goes wrong for her, as always does, and she ends up having to bring it in a Arizona Diamondbacks duffel bag on a city bus to get it back to the
Mm.
synagogue. While on the bus, she gets into an altercation with a guy who has the same tattoo on his arm as the person who pistol whipped her. And
Mm.
unbeknownst to the two of them, they both have Diamondback bags and they get switched on the bus. So she shows up at the synagogue the night before. It's her and the congregant, and they open it up to see the Torah, and instead it's full of bricks of cocaine. And so they now have one night to go on this crazy odyssey to track down the Torah through the seedy, drug dealing, white nationalist underbelly of Arizona. And they end up, like breaking up this whole white nationalist, anti-Jewish like crime ring, and they regain faith in each other and in themselves. And there's all these sort of
Mm.
biblical, surreal moments. And it's just super fun and unique and entertaining and Jewish.
Wow, that sounds awesome. Well,
Yeah,
thanks for
it's
sharing that.
it's a
And
really cool
yeah.
story. And so now you get why I, keep chugging along, even as annoying as it is. And I've never had to like raise this much money for any project I've ever been
Mm.
involved with. I hate doing that too. I mean, I don't think
Mm.
anybody really likes doing that, but it's harder than I thought it was going to be. I'll put it that way.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll turn out. I just had one last question before turning it over to Suzanne, and it's kind of humorous because I realized the more I talk to people outside of the arts world, the more confusing the word producer is to people. And it
Yeah, well,
wasn't
because it
until I
means
heard
30 different things depending on the medium.
totally. I heard a great, speaking of music, Quincy Jones say, if the record sells, people like the music, it was all the artist. If it doesn't sell, if anything goes wrong, it's all the producer. So I was just curious if you could like, kind of quickly sum up basically what being a producer means to you in
It's
this.
so
Yeah.
it literally like there are so many different titles of producer, executive producer, co-executive producer, consulting producer. So like, and they all
Hmm.
differ from stage to television to film to music. I mean, they're all
Hmm.
so different. So I can really,
Yeah.
I'll speak to the role I'm playing on this film, which
Yeah.
is that of sort of a creative and lead producer.
Mm.
So I'm involved in sort of all the strategic decisions
Mm.
at every level, from casting to location to whatever to script
Mm.
notes. I'm having a story by credit in the script because I like get so deep in because I'm a writer also, so I can get really deep into
Mhm.
the story talk. Part of what makes
Yeah.
me like a nice asset is I've been an actor professionally, I've been a writer professionally, I've been a director professionally, I've been a producer
Mm.
professionally, so I can see things from kind of all the angles. Um,
Mhm.
So what I do is I do all those creative and strategic decision-making things. And then also I have to, lead the way in trying to raise money and
Mhm.
financing the thing, and then making sure
Wow.
the thing happens, the way that it's supposed to, that it unfolds, that everything chugs along. And it's like herding cats and putting out fires. Like those are the two
Mm.
main jobs.
Man.
If the machine gets stuck, you got to get it unstuck. And if it hasn't started, you got to figure out how to make it start.
Well, you got this, and I can't wait to see it. And
Thank you.
it's such a treat to chat with. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you,
We could
Joe.
chat all day.
Great conversation for sure. It's very easy to talk
Yeah.
to.
Well, you too. Well, let's bring Suzanne back for some audience questions.
Great. Thank you so much. And yes, thank you, Joe, for asking about the producer. I think so many of us always wonder, what does that mean? So we appreciate that.
Of course.
Somebody asked that the film, it's called The Mensch.
That's right.
And I know when we spoke previously, you had said that the movie was well in place before October 7th.
Yes.
So one, when does the movie come out? And two, do you, in today's world, had you been brought this idea after October 7th? Aside from not the producer roles, would you have wanted to spend time doing a movie like this?
Yeah, and the way I know that's true is I'm a co-executive producer on another film, which is a Jewish story that was brought to me. That one I didn't really have to do anything. I just had to help get some money for it. But I was instantly supportive because it's another one of these movies that sort of fits my personal Jewish narrative Hollywood mission, which is interesting contemporary stories of people who are Jewish. And that's exactly what this other film is. And I was, happy to support it. And F. Murray Abraham is playing the lead, who's a fantastic actor. That one's called Bookends. That already finished production, so that's in post right now. The Mensch, we don't start shooting for another like three months. So I couldn't tell you when you'll be able to see that one. It depends. And also the way the landscape is now, it's most movies, or not all movies for sure, get theatrical releases. Some are going straight to streaming. Some go straight to just video on demand. Some, you see it on the airplane first, so who knows how and when this will be distributed. But right now we're just in the casting and raising money phase. So, if anybody on this chat wants to become a movie producer, hit me up.
And our audience will know at some point, if they hear there's a movie, The Mensch, they heard it here first.
That's right.
How about The Giver? You're writing,
Yes.
writing the musical.
So that, oh man, we have been working on that musical, I would say, for like 13 years in one form or another. It's way too long. The problem is that everybody involved has all these other jobs. And so it's never really, we've only been allowing it to be the primary focus for like a couple months or weeks at a time over the years. It's just been so hard to align on. But we're adapting, the international best-selling book, The Giver. I write the lyrics and co-write the music, and involved with the whole team in sort of structuring and outlining the plot and everything. We finished like 80% of a new draft of it September 1st. This was another great timing thing. It was like, I knew I wanted to start the podcast, but I had to finish that draft, and like the timing just worked out great that we were like turning the draft in September 1st and I was launching the pod October 1st. So I was able to get that off my plate, because there's no way I would have been able to focus on the pod if I had to focus on writing, 5 new songs for this show. It's a really unique and challenging property. That's partly why it's taken so long, is it's such a difficult nut to crack. It's so rich. I don't know how familiar folks are with the book. It's a really unique, imaginative world that is big on, big ideas and themes and emotions, but quite light actually on plot. So we're having to figure out how to show this world, what moments to manufacture to like give it shape and story, and still maintain the themes and emotions that make it so special. So it's been challenging, but we're still chugging along bit by bit.
Well, one day, hopefully we will see it on
One day.
There's been a lot of criticism in Hollywood about a lot of Jews not speaking up post October 7th. Has that made it challenging for you to get guests for your podcast?
Yeah, that's interesting. I would say like definitely the professional group that has said no the most are actors, for sure. I've also gotten many actors. I think I've had 5 on so far. But generally when I ask people, they say yes, except actors, I'm batting like 50-50. And it's a shame. I would say, I do want to say, like, the caveat of it, as many Jews as are being quiet, I have seen like the awakening of a lot of Jews in Hollywood, people who were quiet, who saw after October 7th that they could not afford to be quiet anymore. The problem still is that, like, some of those people prefer still to remain a bit behind the scenes and not quite as loud and proud and really wielding their platform and power as strongly as they might. But I have seen an awakening there. But then, as you say, there are a lot of Jews in Hollywood who are afraid, or are and like so wrongfully afraid, like nothing's gonna happen. They're afraid of, like, the smoke, as Van Jones called it on my show, like strangers on the internet saying mean things to them. Like, literally, that's the main thing they have to worry about. And it's frustrating. It's definitely frustrating. I think also, a thing people don't think about is, like, technically a lot of people in Hollywood are Jews, like, by birth, but many of them are not connected to the community or are not practicing at all. They just happen to be Jewish, but it's, like, not something that's really that important to them. And those are the sort of, I'd much rather blend in and assimilate and not be hated Jews. So them, I almost don't even blame them, because it's like they do not feel connected to the community. And if if it doesn't feel like your people, then okay. It's the ones who it's like, I am Jewish, I am proud to be Jewish, I talk with my family about Jewish, but I won't say a word about it in public because someone might get angry. Like, that's a tough one for me. And
is there a fear that they won't get jobs?
Yes, so there's a fear they won't get jobs. There's a fear that they'll get some hate, and then there's a fear of, like, physical safety. I would say those are the three big fears. In terms of physical safety, I am proud and happy to say there are 0 instances of Jewish actors or writers or influencers, like, being attacked by angry social media fans in real life on the street. It's like, it just doesn't happen ever. It's never happened. So that's not something I worry about particularly, and I don't think others should the way that they do. In terms of losing jobs, the kind of jobs you might lose would be twofold. One would be, like, brand deals. And that wouldn't really be because you're Jewish, or because it would be because you're speaking out about an issue. And that makes you not neutral enough to sell a soda. You know what I mean? So, like, that's sort of like, okay, fair enough. But, like, there are other brands who won't care about that, who will give you opportunity. And then the third one is, then the other type of job is, if someone's not going to hire you because you're a Jew, you don't want to be working with that person. Like, you don't want to work with a racist, anti-Jew bigot. So if you're losing a job because of that, you dodged a bullet. And then, as I said, the third one is the Twitter mob that people are afraid of. And that's literally not real. Like, if you didn't look at your phone for 3 days, you wouldn't even know it was happening. It's not a real thing. I get stupid comments all the time. At this point, they, like, literally don't even upset me. I'm either going to ignore them, not see them at all because I'm busy doing other things, or I'll use them for, like, a teaching moment if I think I can and it's worthwhile for my followers and other people to learn something from it. But it doesn't bother me anymore. I guess I think of it as, like, I'm the one that's very secure in knowing that what I know about this situation is accurate. I've done the homework. It's like, I have a very empathetic and nuanced view of the whole thing. I know what I'm talking about. And so, like, why would I be upset because someone who has no idea what they're talking about is, like, yelling at me? It's like, dude, you're the one who's yelling at a stranger on the internet about a topic you have no understanding of. That's an insane thing. That's an insane behavior. So it doesn't get to me anymore. And it's a shame it exists. I just, like, feel sad that there are people like that doing that. And that, like, our society has become permissive of that.
Well, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you, Joe and Jonah.
Hmm.
I think I know how much people appreciate your voice now to the conversation, and as what you just said is being able to speak out. I mentioned to people that in the intro that Jonah just had a piece in the Times of Israel. I will include that in our follow-up email. I think it's worth a read. Again, thank you everybody for coming. Please go to momentmag.com. You can sign up for next week's program. And we look forward to having everybody again next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thanks, Joe.